Hello, and welcome to another video. This video we're playing some Rage Juggernaut, and if you've seen my community tab, you've already seen the outcome of this match. It is quite brutal, at least for damage taken for me. But this is a good example of kind of like how a team fight would kind of go if you're melee, and like how you should play it and how you should expect to kind of like take a lot of damage. You are the front line, so in this situation I am the basically only frontline that actually decides to play this game. We do have two other frontliners. Had they actually played, we probably would have pushed them out, but unfortunately they didn't really contribute to the match like much at all. Their combat time is probably maybe 1 minute to like a minute and a half, unfortunately. So this means when it comes down to like objectively speaking, we're down players basically. I'm not saying that these players aren't playing, I'm just saying these players aren't contributing. So we are at a rather large disadvantage, and you'll see the damage breakdown and see why and what I'm talking about. Anyway, as a melee, especially going into a bunch of range, your job is typically to try to mitigate and absorb as much damage as you can, especially in the opener. So when I leap and then I use Raging Burst, I have 50% damage reduction, and then I can pop a Journal, which gives me more damage reduction. And as you saw in the opener, I mad dash the AP opener, which then, you know, allows him to lose some damage, but he still has his energy burst, so it's not a big deal for him. And he'll probably just tap off. But obviously that's not always going to be the case. Unfortunately for me, after these Guardians die, they pretty much don't come back. So we're going to start getting pushed back, but initially we pushed them pretty hard. So going into like kind of like what I'm doing and why I'm being so aggressive. If you want your range to kind of like do stuff, you need them to, in general, be able to cast without being interrupted too much. The more time that they can just do whatever they want, the better they're going to do. At least usually when they actually know what they're doing, that's the case. Then also for your healers too, it's obviously very important. They don't handle pressure too much. It's generally just better for them and their force management. And then also you have to think about, you know, burst is really high. Healers don't really have the defensive capabilities to survive that. Also, general rage doesn't really either. But we do have some tools to absorb a decent amount of damage, like Mad Dash. Mad Dash can, at least a well-timed one, can absorb a lot of damage, and leap into like Raging Burst or Smash. You do have 50% damage reduction for a couple seconds once you do that. So leaping in general is just really good defensively, but that's pretty much majority of your damage reduction. You can also see like when I have leap DR and how much less damage I take, and then when I don't have it, how much more damage I take. If you pay attention to it, you can actually see it. It's quite clear. And as for why I'm like trying to hit as many people here, normally, regardless of like whatever match I'm kind of playing, I don't really tunnel people unless they are going to team wipe us. In that situation I will, but for the most part I usually don't, because I don't want people to have a terrible time like how everybody wants to kill me. It's obviously much more reasonable for them to try to kill me because I'm just easier to hit, and then on top of that, I'm making it very hard for most of the players to just do whatever they want. I'm trying to be as disruptive as I can. The class excels at that, honestly, and just being as basically disruptive as I can be. Like, that's my entire goal here. I'm trying to interrupt as much as I can, stun, CC, just basically interrupt, leap, interrupt, stuff like that. Force people to take a lot of damage, have to pop defensives, have to try to tab and kill me. You know, that is the whole like general ideal, because the more that you do that, the better it is for the rest of your team. Then obviously I do have like things like intercede, mad dash. And I do have some tools to disengage, but it's not always a option because they have quite a bit of mercenaries, and I will get netted like a lot in this match, and it's kind of hard for me to always just disengage. Sometimes it's better to just take the reset. And then also, if you're curious, as a frontline, by the way, when it comes to like, do you hit the other frontliner? Like, what do you do? Do you peel? There's like a huge catch-22 with that entire topic. I suppose it's one that's really worth explaining, because I think a lot of people think that it's like, oh, you just peel, you just help. It seems really simple. It seems really one-dimensional, but actually it's definitely a more complex kind of situation. So to put it in the simplest terms, let's say there's somebody like a mitigation tank hitting somebody and they can't like kill them effectively or fast. Basically what you kind of have to do there is just deal with it. I hate saying that, but it's honestly the best move. If everybody goes and starts hitting that mitigation tank, he is technically doing his job correctly. He is going to mitigate a lot of damage. He's going to waste a lot of resources for him to get killed. And in general, he's going to have the focus of everybody. That means everybody else is going to be able to free cast and do a massive amount of damage. Chances are you're probably going to clump to do that. It's just all around a lose-lose for your team and better for the enemy team. While it might let the one person play a little bit better, it's going to be a net loss for the entire team. And a complete net gain for the enemy team. Now, let's say it's not a mitigation tank, and it's just a regular DPS. Eventually, they will die. Usually, when they push like that, they have defensives. So the best thing to really do is CC and pull them away, like in any way, like electro bindings, anything that you can use to keep them at bay. That's the better move. It's not necessarily good to just dogpile them unless you have the raw damage to absolutely nuke them. So that's why you'll see me a lot of times just not even bothering to hit the PT. That will overextend a lot. It's not because I'm not interested in killing him. It's that it's just not beneficial for me to tunnel into Pyro Shield. It's not beneficial for me to tunnel into PT in general because they have relatively nice tankiness, and then also the fact that Arsenal, like in general, free casting Arsenal, while it might not do a lot of overall damage, it is a decent amount of burst, and then you pair that with AP. The speed that I would die if I did that would be way faster. I would get dropped with like a 70k rail shot with like 100k priming shot or something like that. And then AP could quite literally just hit 2 abilities if they had the burst up, and I would just die. So it's much better for me to be as disruptive as possible because my class excels at that, to prevent that from kind of happening. So it's a thing that you kind of just have to think about more than just, oh, peel. Like, it's some things are just, it's not as simple. It's a thing that I could explain completely, but obviously it's going to be a struggle because all situations are different. Each situation is going to play differently, and that's where having knowledge of knowing how to do it like comes into effect, I guess. Like, a lot of people might think they know, but do they really? It's a situation where it's not super complicated, but it is something that you have to have already experienced or already have a solution to for you to kind of like see how it happens. Sometimes you have to learn by, you know, having the worst happen to you. Like, you try to peel and you all just get absolutely nuked because you clumped up. Like, there's a lot of situations that you kind of just have to learn for yourself, but there's also a lot of situations where they can be completely avoided by, you know, somebody teaching you that, hey, this is a bad idea. However, when it comes to like a good ideal of like when to peel and when to like deal with people, is when it's a low amount of players. Like, let's say there's 3 players, right, in total. There's a sniper. And for simplicity's sake, there's 2 juggernauts. When it comes to peeling there, dealing with the juggernauts is going to be a lot harder. And basically what you want to do is constantly align the sniper. And when it comes to the juggernauts, let's just say you're playing Rage or something, obviously you want to be taunting and then interceding and pretty much CCing when you can actually CC. You're going to have to pay attention to when you can. And obviously there's windows where it's better. Obviously don't CC at full health. That's completely pointless. But obviously in that situation, you're letting the sniper and you're dealing with the juggernauts one by one. Juggernauts have a decent amount of healing defensives, so it's going to be a decent amount of damage to actually burn them down. So what you're going to want to do is not only taunt, but you're also going to want to, outside of peel, you know, taunt, intercede, stuff like that, and CC at proper times. You want to focus on one, wait until they pop a defensive. So for example, Saber Ward, swap off, hit the other one until they pop Saber Ward 2, for example. Then swap back to the next one, so on and so forth. It's much better to do it that way rather than just tunnel through the defensives, because it's going to take you longer to kill them. And with the damage being as high as it basically is, chances are you're going to be able to kill them at a relatively faster rate doing it that way. And also another good example of like when to peel to is if somebody can pillar hug. Let's say you like have a healer and they can pillar hug. If you ever get into a situation like that, or if you have just like a lethality operative that can pillar hug, which by the way, for lethality operative, pillar hugging is probably the best thing you could ever do against a whole bunch of range. If they actually come to melee to fight you for that, what you can do is try to slow root CC, do anything to make it harder for them to hit the person they're trying to hit while they pillar hug. And then obviously if you're playing like lethality, you can pre-set up your lethal haze and they'll automatically already walk into it. So then you can just free set up damage, you know, follow with a CC, and chances are you guys can do a lot of damage to them for them being over aggressive. But typically when it comes to peeling, it's really just a matter of if you peel, what happens? Like think about the rest of the team. What happens to the rest of your teammates? What happens to the rest of the enemies? Is there a lot of enemies that are going to be suddenly able to free gas? If yes, it's probably not always the best ideal. Somebody needs to stop all the free casters. And if nobody does, you guys will just die faster. The peeling won't work because you will just die the free casting. It's not gonna do you any good at all. And when it comes to, let's say they just don't have the damage, or you just have superior survivability, in that situation it's really just line of sighting and forcing focus fire. Obviously not through defensives, but there's a lot of stuff that you can actually extend the durability or life when you actually do peel. But again, it's just a matter of what's going to happen. If their damage sucks, peeling is great. If their damage is really oppressive, and there's a lot of classes that will start free casting if there's nobody stopping them, not a great idea to go and try to peel. In those situations, when it comes to something like that, it's much better for the range to fend for themselves. This is why range need to learn how to play under pressure. While having a frontline is extremely important to help those range players, they still have to be somewhat self-efficient. And obviously, yes, I know dealing with certain classes as a range player is quite hard to deal with some of them. This is obviously where a tank is very helpful. But peeling, you know, debatably is not always the best ideal. In general, most range classes have abilities to keep things at bay, so if somebody does overextend, there are things that you can do. You have CC, you have knockbacks, you have the ability to run away relatively fast and create more distance than they could ever hope to like try to close. I know a lot of people use their force speed and use it for damage, or don't really use it to go very far. You can actually run extremely far at force speed. I know a lot of people just don't bother to do that. It's one thing they should definitely start doing, especially if you have that issue. Now we're coming to the end here. One thing I want you guys to look at, if you pause the match, you can see who's on my team, who's not. The next highest damage is under 2 million outside of the sorcerer on our team. We are well over 10 to 15 million more, or they have 10 to 15 more million damage. English, it's pretty rough. But in general, this is kind of like how you would play if you're the only melee